everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Gemini. I want to give a shout out to advancedastrology.com where I am deriving this information. Of course, I'm riffing on it and interpreting it in my own way. And really, when I was kind of skimming through this, because that's about as far as I go, I was getting the feeling of somebody with that it's the equivalent of somebody with Mercury and Scorpio, that kind of thing. And, that's just a way to get a handle on how this influence will affect somebody. You could look at it as a combination of two signs, Gemini and Scorpio, and how do they interact with one another. If Gemini is about mundane knowledge, information, and the mind itself, you could say, I'm talking about via the third house that it rules, and you talk about Scorpio, there's an obsessive quality for information. The person may ferret out things, may be very good at that, and that can also lead to believing that there's more than meets the eye when they are dealing with people and dealing with communication involving other people. Sometimes because Lilith can have this extreme quality to it, people can feel like they're not allowed to speak their mind. And this can go back to childhood, of course. And it reminds me of Chiron in Gemini in that sense. Sometimes Lilith reminds me of Chiron too. But in any case, because of this extreme quality of Lilith, this rebellious quality, there can be, battles that are waged over communication in some way. Now, this, they talk about playing the devil's advocate, and of course, there are other indicators in the chart that can be like that. I even have that tendency, or that trollishness, that provocative quality that provokes emotion in other people based on your words. It's like kind of the instigator in a sense. And this can happen, like, for instance, when I'm thinking about myself, I have Mars in the 9th house, which is Sagittarius house, and that is a mental house, just like the 3rd house that Gemini rules. It's the opposite sign of Gemini. And also I have Mercury in Sagittarius. Fire energy tends to be rebellious. In this case, the thing that is going on is it's not even necessarily something that the person is doing deliberately. It just is part of how they operate, in a sense, you could say, that they want to kind of provoke. Whether I would say conflict is a different story. I think more like getting to the heart of the matter. And sometimes, people, when they talk, they're very mamby-pamby because they're trying to just, go along to get along, but then they're not really being truthful in their communication. So I could see somebody like this doing that kind of, those kinds of things in order to kind of ferret out that truth that they're always trying to get. And along the way, there can be a lot of battles because of it. And the other thing too is, and I've noticed this with people these days, where they'll say, I'm just saying the truth, I'm just telling the truth about something, and they're doing it in a very aggressive way, or not with enough sensitivity. And I'm trying to find the part where they talk about this. They mention, they use the word thoughtlessness and aggression. You know what I mean? They say aggressive and thoughtless. And that's very interesting, because that would almost imply that the person is doing it deliberately. I think that, but well, not necessarily being thoughtless. That's just being kind of clumsy, you know. But the aggression is, it reminds me of that scorpionic quality because, you know, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, and that's kind of like the secrets and the power and things like that. But Mars also, and Mars is that aggressive quality. I think with Lilith, it's this idea of like, you know, people trying to shut us up. So we're going to speak our minds. And then that makes people go to the other extreme. So especially if you were raised where you were not allowed to talk back to your parents or other adults, that can really bring out that quality. Sometimes people adopt the mentality of the person who is abusing them or, you know, suppressing them, and they feel like, oh yeah, that's the authority figure, so I have to shut up. But then some people take it to the other extreme and they're like, no, you can't tell me what to do, because they're very rebellious. So it could go either way. And the other thing that I noticed that they were talking about here is this idea about secrets. So I feel like I didn't see that they said you were necessarily secretive. But I do think that definitely people with this placement are secretive. Yeah, no, they did. They said you can hide your interests from the world, and they said that you could be interested in taboo subjects, and that's there again. That kind of connects to Scorpio, and also obsessive thought patterns. And when somebody somebody has a conjunction between Mercury and Pluto, that's another thing. If you have contacts between Mercury and Pluto, this can also play out. And, you know, sometimes obsessive thoughts can simply be that you have your pet things that you're really into and that you can't get enough of. You know, conspiracy theories are a big one because going down that rabbit hole and trying to uncover all of the hidden knowledge, hidden information, misinformation, disinformation, definitely could be part of that. So it goes without saying that you have to be tactful in your communication style, because you may feel justified in being aggressive. You may feel like somebody is telling half-truths or whatever, lying, straight up lying, or simply that they're not facing the truth and you want to kind of, you know, I was going to say beat them over the head with the truth, but it's really, you know, there again, talking about myself, I'm talking about myself only to illustrate, not to, you know, because I'm in love with talking about myself. But being Mercury and Sagittarius, there's often that blunt quality. I would say Mercury and Aries too. Mercury in conjunction with Mars, or even like squaring off opposing Mars, is that, you know, there tends to be this aggressive quality because the person wants to be independent of thought, in thought, and doesn't want other people trying to control them through their thoughts and their feelings. And the problem is that it can go too far. I mean, you can react too much to it, that it creates that overly aggressive tendency. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that, so that you're not being over the top. And the other thing, that this is also true with those other examples that I gave with Mercury in the eighth house. That can be another one that's similar to that. So if you have Mercury in the eighth house, or Mercury in Scorpio, or Mercury in conjunction with Pluto, and you have Black Moon, Lilith, and Gemini, watch out. Look to see what house your Lilith is in, too, because that'll give you more information about what you are particularly outspoken about. But yeah, if you have these other placements, that's going to exacerbate things. But you may have a knack for being able to get inside somebody's head, because I always say this about people with Mercury in the eighth or Mercury in Pluto, is that they really have an innate understanding of I was going to say astrology, of psychology. And so it's very easy for them to kind of like suss out what a person, what makes a person tick. Well, you add Gemini to the mix, and it can be very dangerous, because you can be able to manipulate people. And yes, of course, there is emotional manipulation, and that is insidious as well. But somebody who's able to mind F somebody, that's really dangerous, because it can be very subtle. I think emotional manipulation is much more blatant. If you try to guilt somebody, for instance, but when you're like getting inside somebody's head, that is very dangerous. And so because you have this ability, you have to use it wisely, and not use it as a weapon of mass destruction. They say some things here that I don't know if I would agree with. Maybe you do. They mention feeling like people don't understand you, and that you feel lonely, maybe disconnected from others. I suppose maybe with that Gemini thing, it's like the abstraction of thought makes it hard, because when you're communicating, if you're really communicating at a heartfelt level, then it's not about remaining so detached. And then they said about not having coping mechanisms. Where was that? I'll just read what it says verbatim. Sometimes this placement lacks healthy coping mechanisms. You can be detached from your emotions or try to overly rationalize them. And yeah, that's true of air signs in general. And so, for instance, if you have your moon in air, then you're going to be especially vulnerable to, let me backtrack. I don't think it's necessarily vulnerable. You might have the tendency to get very abstract with everything that's happening, and overly intellectualize your emotions. And that can make it hard for you to feel. But sometimes that can be a saving grace, actually. I don't necessarily think that it's going to be problematic unless you are someone, if you are like a water sign with this, then you may have this contradictory pattern, and that can be very like crazy making for other people, because, or even for yourself, because you have a natural desire to really tap into that second chakra, which is about the emotions, and you might feel that you are underactive in that chakra, and even the heart chakra too, the fourth chakra. So that might create some kind of blockage, or just a feeling that something isn't flowing properly in some way. But I don't know if that means that you can't cope. People who are very emotional sometimes have trouble coping. So I don't know. See, this is what I say. You can read books, you can go to websites, and you can interact with information, but you don't necessarily have to buy everything that you read because you have your own mind. So I'm telling you what they're saying, and you can decide whether or not that's true for you. Another thing that I'm not quite sure I agree with is that they say that you might, they say that you're often afraid of rejection. I don't, I, and they specify when people aren't paying attention to you, when they're not interested in your take on things. I would say the latter might be true because you're probably very passionate about your beliefs. But I don't know if that would necessarily hurt you very deeply, as they say. So, again, that might be depending on certain people. Um, Now, they mention being involved with fraud, but they were talking about kind of ferreting out the um, motivations of other people's, and they said so maybe being able to detect somebody's criminal behavior. Definitely, I would say that this position is good for anything that involves um, criminal, even like the psychologically, the mind of a criminal. You maybe even your reading material. Um, it could be true crime and that sort of thing, mysteries, detective stories. They talk about the macabre sense of humor. uh, this is also verbatim. You have a dark sense of humor. Others may find your jokes insensitive or repulsive. That's pretty funny. Um, the outlets that they talk about for this kind of influence, they mention journaling, other forms of writing, and the what they call fine motor skills. They call it hand dexterity, but it's like fine motor skills. That's associated with Gemini. So anything like if you do crafty things, I would assume that would qualify, that you would be very good at, and that's a great way to use this energy in a productive way. There was something else I wanted to say about this. There's a saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. So if you feel like you have repressed certain information, but it's bothering you, think about if there are people that you trust that you can reveal this to. Um, I wanted to say something else, and now I can't remember what it was. I guess, oh well. But I did want to say that you may have an obsession with learning, and that can be used in a good way, especially if you're interested in the field of education, um, and you really like to read. So you might have a wide knowledge base, and other people may look at you as well read, and you might be quite eloquent too, and very quick intellectually. The thing is that it can be a double-edged sword, I think, because just like we can expand our world through the life of the mind, there's also that obsessive quality sometimes to thoughts, or the secrecy. I don't think they mentioned other people in particular, but I would say too that maybe other people's secrets are things that you have had to kind of keep locked within yourself. And so the idea of thoughts can have, like, it can be that double-edged sword where they can, lead you to great things, but by the same time, they can be quite troublesome. So learning to integrate this, learning to be able to be less, suspicious in how you perceive other people, that might be helpful. Being more open and not being worried about things, because a lot of times people are afraid of things because they have that nature within themselves. So, I mean, this position, you might take somebody else's dirt or, whatever, and turn it against them and use it against them, and maybe as a source of power or revenge. And so that might make you feel like other people are going to do that to you. But if you're not afraid, if you don't feel like you have anything to hide, then there's no weapon to begin with that anybody can use against you. So just remember that. All right, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.